Welcome back to another collection of unsettling true stories from ordinary people who've experienced the unexplainable and the terrifying. Tonight, I have three chilling tales that might make you question how well you know the people around you and how safe you really are in familiar places. Turn off the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to feel that prickling sense of dread creep up your spine.
I grew up in a small, tight-knit town in northern Wisconsin. We had more pine trees than people, and most of us went to the same high school from freshman to senior year. Because our town was so small, everyone sort of knew everyone else's business, or at least we thought we did. When I was a junior, a new girl arrived in the middle of the school year. I'll call her Raven. That obviously wasn't her real name. She had pale skin and wore black clothes from head to toe, every single day, even in negative-degree weather. She claimed she had a strange power that touched her at birth. Teachers mostly ignored her odd comments, but students whispered she might be into witchcraft. The rumor mill ran wild with gossip. Despite my normal skepticism, I experienced something with Raven that still makes my skin crawl. One Friday afternoon in study hall, we got assigned to the same table. She stared at me with these unblinking, piercing green eyes. In a hushed voice, she said, "You have a dark presence around you." I almost laughed, thinking she was just playing into her own hype. But then she added something. "They'll call to you if you say my name thrice." It was such a bizarre statement, and I shrugged it off, until the weird occurrences started. Anytime someone gossiped about Raven, if they said her actual name 3 times in quick succession, she would appear within minutes. Not like she literally popped into thin air, but she always seemed to know. You'd find her quietly standing at the end of a hallway or lurking by your locker with that same eerie stare. My friends thought it was just good timing or chance. I admit I was unsettled but tried to ignore it. However, a friend of mine named Jordan decided to test it. We were in the cafeteria after school, waiting for basketball practice to start, and Jordan said Raven's real name 3 times mockingly. 10 seconds later, guess who was peering around the corner of the entrance door? Yep, Raven. She said nothing, just stared at us for a moment before slipping out of sight. The last straw came during a pep rally when our entire school was in the gym. Jordan, who never believed any of this, started chanting Raven's real name like an obnoxious cheer. "Raven! Raven! Raven!" he yelled. Everyone around him started laughing, but I felt a jolt of fear. Within seconds, I spotted Raven way up in the highest bleachers. She turned her head slowly and locked eyes with me across the entire gymnasium. It sent a chill that traveled up my spine and settled deep in my bones. After that day, Raven disappeared. We learned she moved away. No warnings, no goodbyes. The rumor was her parents had some emergency, but nobody really knew. In the weeks that followed, I found little drawings in my locker that I'm still convinced were from her. Small, detailed sketches of disfigured silhouettes, always with 3 sets of glowing eyes. The scariest part was the faint scrawling at the bottom. "They hear you." I'm older now, away at college, but every once in a while I'll have a dream of those haunting green eyes watching from some corner of my subconscious. If you ever meet someone who insists you say their name 3 times, maybe think twice.
Sometimes it's not just high school rumors or teenage pranks. Sometimes the danger is all too real, hiding behind a seemingly innocent situation. Our next story comes from a woman who learned the hard way that stopping to help can lead to a life or death scenario.
I was driving through rural Pennsylvania farmland on my way to visit extended family. It was late November, and the days were growing short. By 4:30 in the afternoon, the sun was already slipping below the hills, painting the sky a gloomy gray. I had a 2-hour drive ahead and was eager to get there before dark. About an hour into the trip, I passed the same beat-up white sedan 2 or 3 times. It was pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights flickering. The first time I saw it, I thought maybe the driver was making a quick stop or checking a tire. The second time, I got suspicious. By the third time, something felt off. How could I pass the exact same car multiple times unless it was leapfrogging or following me? My instincts screamed at me to keep driving, but I let my conscience get the better of me. What if the driver really needed help? There's no cell service in some parts of that countryside. So, after seeing it one more time, this time with a hooded figure waving me down. Curiosity and guilt overpowered my fear. I pulled onto the shoulder a few yards behind the sedan, leaving my headlights shining on it. I cracked my window open, but kept my doors locked. An older man in a bulky coat hurried over, leaning down to speak. He had a kindly, if a bit tired face and said, "My daughter's stuck in the car. The door latch is broken, and she can't climb out the driver's side because of her bad leg. Could you help me hold it open while she crawls across?" It was the strangest request I'd ever heard. My common sense told me this was a potential trap, but he seemed so desperate. I said I'd call for roadside assistance. He shook his head vigorously, saying he'd been trying for an hour and had no signal. Against every alarm bell in my mind, I got out of my car, phone in hand, and walked closer. As I approached, I felt a strange energy, like the quiet farmland around us was darker and more watchful than usual. The man kept beckoning me toward the passenger side. The window was cracked, and I heard a muffled whimper from inside, which made my heart pound. So I stepped closer. Just then, my phone buzzed with a weak signal. I glanced down at it, thinking I could call 911 or a towing service. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the back of the sedan, almost like a second figure ducking down. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. Suddenly, a primal terror took over. Without a second thought, I backpedaled, hopped into my car, and locked the doors. The man started yelling, his tone shifting from pleading to angry in a heartbeat. He pounded on my window, and I felt my blood run cold. I slammed the gas and took off, scattering gravel as I merged onto the empty road. Checking my rear view, I saw him standing there, fists clenched, still hollering. No sign of any daughter in the passenger side. I sped the rest of the way to my family's place, hands trembling on the wheel. Later, I found a small dent near my back fender, as if someone had struck it with a crowbar or heavy tool. I never reported it, partly out of fear that the police would brush me off or that I was overreacting. But every time I drive those roads, I remember how easily a good intention can turn into a potential nightmare.
It can be easy to let our guard down when we feel pity or guilt, but as you just heard, that can be dangerous. Our final story takes place inside the supposed safety of one's own home and involves a trusted adult with hidden motives. This story might make you question how well you really know your family.
In the early 1990s, when I was around 9 or 10, my parents got divorced. It was an ugly split, and for a while, my mom and I moved into my Aunt Melody's house. Aunt Mel was a charismatic woman, always laughing and telling the best jokes. She also had a penchant for New Age beliefs, tarot, dream analysis, crystals, you name it. Everyone in the family said she was eccentric but harmless. At first, I loved living there. Aunt Mel turned the attic into a cozy makeshift bedroom for me. She gave me crystals she said would help me sleep. But over time, I started having disturbing nightmares. Sometimes it was about losing my mom in a crowd or being trapped in a dark pit alone. Other times, I saw Aunt Mel herself, but her face was blank or twisted. One night, unable to bear the nightmares, I confided in her. She listened intently, nodding with a grave expression. Then she gave me a small dream catcher and hung it above my bed. "This will filter out the bad dreams," she said. Initially it helped, no nightmares for almost 2 weeks. Suddenly they started again, worse than ever. I'd jolt awake drenched in sweat, convinced someone was in the room with me. One particularly bad dream involved a shadow figure at the foot of my bed, whispering my name. I told Aunt Mel, and her only reaction was to rub some essential oil on my wrists and say, "You must release your tension toward your mother." Confused, I asked what tension she meant. Aunt Mel insisted I was harboring subconscious resentment about the divorce. "Once you accept your anger," she told me, "your nightmares will vanish." She started encouraging me to disobey my mom, to talk back, claims it would help me express my repressed feelings. I was desperate to stop the nightmares, so I started arguing with my mom over small things, leaving Aunt Mel smirking in the background. But the nightmares persisted, intensifying. Aunt Mel then suggested a treatment in the middle of the night. She claimed she needed to be there when I was at my most vulnerable, between dreaming and waking. One evening, she told me to leave my bedroom window unlocked so the energy could flow. It felt bizarre, but at 10 years old, I had limited judgment. A few nights later, I woke at around 2 a.m. to find Aunt Mel standing by the window, the moonlight outlining her silhouette. She was chanting softly, holding some kind of crystal pendulum. I gasped. She spun around and put a finger to her lips, shushing me. I felt frozen with fear. After a moment, she slowly walked out, leaving me trembling. I wanted to tell my mom, but I feared no one would believe me. Eventually, I mustered the courage to mention Aunt Mel's behavior. My mom's face darkened. That same night, after I'd gone to bed, I heard my mom confront Aunt Mel downstairs. There was furious shouting I'd never heard from my mother before. The argument ended abruptly, followed by the sound of stomping feet. The next morning, my mom packed our bags. We left and never returned to Aunt Mel's house. Years later, I found out my mom discovered strange diaries in Aunt Mel's bedroom. She'd been recording my sleep patterns, describing each nightmare in detail, and seemed almost excited that they were happening. There were disturbing notes that read like instructions for making me face my terror. My mom still won't share all the details, but from what she implied, Aunt Mel might have been experimenting on me psychologically, using whatever bizarre, New Age methods she believed in. We never fully reconciled with Aunt Mel. To this day, I'm not sure if she truly had some spiritual power, or if she was just unbalanced. Either way, I rarely dream now, and honestly, that might be for the best.
Sometimes the people we trust or the situations we underestimate can reveal darkness lurking just below the surface. A classmate who can't seem to stay away when summoned, a roadside stranger with hidden motives, or an overly intrusive relative using dream rituals, each story reminds us that true horror can strike anywhere, anytime. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you've enjoyed these chilling tales, consider leaving a comment or sharing your own strange experiences. And remember, the scariest moments often happen when we least expect them. Stay safe out there. Until next time, sweet dreams.